It can happen to you when you're young at heart. How are ya? It's the second day of October. It's 8:40 in the morning here in western Iowa. And is this heaven? I mean, it could be. This was the sunset last night right here in western Iowa. Beautiful. With a few high cirrus clouds out there to play off the setting sun. Just gorgeous. So I took this with my Pixel 8 Pro, which is now my webcam. I use it for everything. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. One of these days, I'm going to grow up and be an amateur photographer. That's one of my goals. All right, let's take a look at those high cirrus clouds now moving across parts of Iowa. Here they are. And this was the last few hours of the infrared satellite. So a patch of cirrus clouds. We had pretty nice sunrise this morning too. And a few high clouds moving across Nebraska. They'll be here in Iowa off and on. I mean, the main thing on this map is just how quiet it is around the United States. We have a patch of clouds here, maybe a little bit of weather. I know everybody's getting weather, depends on what kind, but the most active weather is right along the Canadian border, and that's going to be the case for a while. We have a low way up here, Hudson's Bay, the trailing cold front moving through the Midwest, eastern Great Lakes, maybe a few showers here, but again, mainly on the Canadian side. We see a little system in the Pacific Northwest, kind of another front here, some jet stream energy. So look at these wavy clouds in Montana. That's just indicative of very strong winds above their heads. And it's going to be windy in this entire region here. And we can show you that in the hazards because all that wind and the dry conditions we've had, it's just going to lead to high fire danger. So red flag warnings are up. South Dakota, Nebraska, a little bit of Colorado into Wyoming, parts of Montana. Just dry, very warm, and windy. So the fire danger is high. And here too, in western Iowa, they're warning us a little bit too of some excessive fire dangers. So just be careful. If you're playing with matches, like I always like to say, if you smoke, keep your butts in the car. All right, further to the north into northwestern Montana, this is mainly Rockies and the eastern slopes. We have, what is that, a high wind watch, I think? It's kind of hard to discern the different shades of brown, but I do believe high wind watch. If you're watching on your TV, you have an advantage over me. You can see this map better than I can. Still river flooding across the southeast into the central coast. Why do I always do that? The mid-Atlantic. And then we have some fog concerns, eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, parts of Georgia and Alabama. And the heat is still on in the west, western parts of Arizona into southern California, and then up the coast and the central areas too of California. Anything from excessive heat warnings here in that purplish, reddish, magenta color. And then the heat advisories in the orange. So yeah, still hot here. Let's go to our weather spotlight. Because if you've been tuning in the last couple of days, first of all, thank you very much for doing that. And we've been talking about the possibility of some tropical development in the Caribbean, or now it's kind of shifted northward into the Gulf. And so here are all the tropical systems in the Atlantic. Now, Hurricane Kirk, boldly going where no hurricane has gone before. I'm sure other hurricanes have been in the middle of nowhere out here in the Atlantic. We have a 90% chance of development with the red X. And then the orange area, when I move to the next map, just showing that, it's a 40% chance of development, mainly in the Gulf here for the next 7 days. So it's a below 50% chance of development into a tropical system. And the GFS I've been showing you is going back and forth on whether or not there's going to be some sort of tropical system, either tropical storm or hurricane moving towards maybe Florida. That has been on again, off again. And when we get to the GFS, spoiler alert, the hurricane is not there. It's just a bunch of tropical moisture. So it keeps flip-flopping, and until we get consistency on model runs, we're just going to leave it open, and we'll just keep an eye on it, and we'll see what happens. And sometimes that's the best thing to do. All right, surface for today, cold front that we showed you on the infrared, spreading those clouds and showers into New York, Pennsylvania, the Virginias, Maryland, maybe even into Delaware a little bit, North Carolina, South Carolina, scattered showers, Florida mainly, and then up in the Pacific Northwest again, that front draped across the Canadian United States border from North Dakota westward, and then that front moving through the Pacific Northwest, maybe a little bit of snow up there in the Cascades. Temperature wise, this is going to be a fairly boring forecast. It's going to be mostly very warm and very dry. And that's probably for the next 2 weeks. So if you're watching this, especially to the end, you really love weather. And if you're like me, you're zeroed in on where you live, to see what's going on. But I'll try to hit the highlights while you check out your area. For my area and into Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, much above average on the temperatures today. Most of the West, well above average on the temperatures today, except for the Northwest and again along the Canadian border. Our East Coast system, temperatures 5, maybe 10, more like 5 degrees below average for some over here. What does that translate to actual temperatures? Very warm. Central Plains, Northern Plains. We've got 90 for Hastings, Nebraska, 92 up there in, is that Goodland, Kansas? I'm not, I shouldn't go on a limb on that one. I'm not sure. Up there in the northwestern corner of Kansas, 92. Even in Texas, we've got upper 80s, low 90s. You get into the Midwest, upper 70s, we have some 60s up there in Michigan. Certainly West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, into the Northeast. That's where we're seeing more of our rain and cooler temperatures. Continued hot in the desert Southwest. Again, these are not necessarily official highs. This is 4 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Pacific. So 101 for Phoenix could actually get a little hotter later in the afternoon. Same for the Central California areas near 100, probably a little bit more than that once we get to the highs. The temperatures to start the day tomorrow. We see a lot of 50s on this map when you're in the Midwest into the Great Lakes, even down to Arkansas. The 55 right there for Little Rock. We see plenty of 50s, like I said, into the Midwest, and then some 40s, Northeast, 40s, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, parts of South Dakota, and then as you head westward, especially the states bordering the Canadian border, lots of 40s here and 30s, mainly for northwestern Montana, parts of Idaho, parts of Wyoming, parts of Washington State. So it's getting to be that time of year. Even though we're trending above average, we're still seeing temperatures below or near freezing. The growing season has ended for some in northwestern Montana, for example. Surface for tomorrow. So our cold front making some progress through the northern plains into the Midwest. A little bit of light rain, perhaps southern Iowa into northern Missouri into Illinois. The big story here is going to be the heat, especially when we get into the weekend ahead of that front. That front's going to move through and keep us from heating up too much, but then it's going to heat up a lot this weekend. Anyway, scattered showers for the southeast and a little bit of rain for the Pacific Northwest. How odd for them. Here are your anomalous temperatures. Well above average continues for Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, into Oklahoma and Texas, and also California. Near average northern plains into the upper Midwest, and also the mid-Atlantic into the southeast, near average temperatures, which look like this. That would be mid to upper 70s for the Carolinas to near 80. That's average for this time of year, apparently. And then you get further to the west in the southeast, we have more 80s, and then we start to hit 90s. Shreveport, Louisiana, 90. Upper 80s to low 90s for Texas, and Oklahoma, mid 90s, Kansas. But behind the front cooler, so we still see some 60s up here along the Canadian border, and even some 50s with elevation, and still hot the Southwest and California. Just to underscore how dry it's going to be for the next 2 days, this is your 48-hour rainfall forecast, and it's dry. I mean, there's some rain in the Gulf, but barely making it onshore, say southern Louisiana, but offshore, a couple inches of rain. If you have an oil rig out there, or if you're boating, I guess. A little bit of rain up there for New York State, Pennsylvania, Virginia, but not a lot, not even half inch really. And just a little bit for the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. Surface for Friday shows more rain coming in for the Northwest and possibility of snow for the Cascades. A little bit of rain for the Northeast, showery type weather along the Appalachians into the Gulf Coast with scattered showers here. Anomalous temperatures Friday. So we're still much above average now for, say, the northern plains into the inland parts of the Northwest and for California, but the coastal areas of the Northwest getting much cooler with a system that is moving in. We actually have three that'll be moving into the Northwest for the next couple of weeks. Another patch of below average temperatures down there, Alabama, Georgia. Those highs look like that, 70s, Alabama, Georgia, into the mid-Atlantic and right up the coast. A few 60s way up there, New York State, and into New England. Also some 60s for, say, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, but a lot of 70s on this map for the northern plains, for the Midwest, transitioning to low 90s, Oklahoma into parts of Texas, and still hot desert Southwest. They just can't shake that dome of high pressure. All right, let's take a look at the GFS, and we'll go a couple weeks ahead. Let me get started on today. So this is this morning, 12Z, 7 o'clock this morning, 2 hours ago maybe. Pretty quiet. Here's our cold front moving through New York State and Pennsylvania, but otherwise quiet. We go through today. That's through today. This gets us to tomorrow. And then finally, by tomorrow night, we see a little bit of moisture moving into the Florida panhandle. See, I have to be really careful where I put my cursor. So where was I? Right about there, I guess. All right, there we go. So this is getting into, that's Friday night. So you see that system moving into the Pacific Northwest. Nice little front with that. Some heavy rainfall. This is again Friday morning, Friday noon, afternoon. A few showers for the Northwest. And we see the winds really cranking up here in the northern plains. This is going to be a big issue. So we have high pressure to the east. We have strong low pressure on the Canadian side of the Canadian border. The rotation of the winds around the high is this way. And then around the low is this way. So we get strong southerly winds into central northern plains, especially northern plains. It's heating up. It's been very dry, and it's going to be very windy. So fire danger is going to be really high for this area as we get into the weekend. Saturday is just going to be brutally hot. And I'll show you those temperatures, but just spoiler alert, Omaha is here, and we're expecting some very gusty winds and a high temperature of 94. The record is 95. The all-time record for October is 96. So yeah, very hot on Saturday. So we'll continue with the winds, and then this system in Canada, which is driving a lot of this wind, the pressure difference between the high and the low, stays well to the north, but some of the effects being felt as far south as Michigan as that front moves through, but most of the weather up there in Canada A. Meanwhile, we get through the weekend. This gets us to Monday. We're starting to see more showers and storms for Florida, but what we don't see is a tropical storm. We don't see a hurricane. We do see tropical moisture in the Gulf, and some of that affecting especially Florida and some of the Gulf states. But I mean, this gets us into Tuesday, and it's raining, some scattered showers and heavy rainfall in places, but pretty quiet. Pacific Northwest getting another system in here by, this is the 8th. This is early afternoon, evening. So a little bit of a low, but tropical moisture, no tropical storms, no hurricanes. In the Gulf, very quiet across much of the country. The Northwest seeing a little bit of action. This is getting us, this is Thursday afternoon. This gets us into Friday, and then another system here gets us to the 11th, or this is late morning for the West Coast. So a system moving into Northern California and Oregon as we get into Columbus Day Saturday. Now, Pacific Northwest residents will remember, and it's even before my time, but it was in the 60s. It was the Columbus Day storm is very famous. You might want to Google it. It caused all kinds of wind damage. It was basically a cold core hurricane that hit the Pacific Northwest back in the 60s. Was it 67? I don't know. I should have looked it up first. But anyway, so we're getting to that time of year, right, where we start to see those kinds of transitions. Although this year, looks like the first half of October is just going to be quiet. And so again, the Gulf is quiet. Now you remember, if you were here yesterday, we were showing a hurricane moving up Baja California into the Gulf of California and the moisture moving into Arizona. Well, that's not on this run either. So as I cautioned yesterday, and I'll caution again today, as we get, further out into these forecasts for these computer models, we just have less and less certainty. And if we're not getting consistency in the runs, then we just can't have confidence in the forecast. But this is interesting. After saying all that, however, look at this. Pretty cold air. This is the 16th. Really the Tuesday night, midnight, cold air intrusion for the Great Lakes with some snow in the UP Peninsula, maybe even northern Michigan, like Traverse City, Cadillac maybe. And you see this, the 540 line, which again tells me this is pretty cold air, is all the way down into Virginia. Now, again, we're 2 weeks out. So will this happen? Maybe. Something to keep in mind, and we'll keep an eye on it, of course. All right. So that's the GFS bouncing back and forth between tropical systems in the Gulf. Yes, no, yes, no. Right now it's no. I'm going to stick with no until we get indications otherwise and consistency in the run. So, all right, here we go Saturday. This is what I was talking about. Windy, hot, fire danger very high for the central and northern plains. Again, this is our anomalous temperatures for, Nebraska, Kansas, western Iowa, 20, 30 more degrees above average. This is really our danger spot. How does that translate into temperatures? Well, the local meteorologist was saying 94 for Omaha. If you look there on this map, 97 is Hastings, 96 is Omaha, right along the Missouri River there. And if we get 96 in Omaha, that'll tie the all-time October record. So I'm kind of hoping we don't get there. You don't want to break those kinds of records. I don't anyway. It's too hot, but it's going to be windy and it's been very dry. So that's the big weather story this weekend. I think the heat too. Even Central Plains, even down into Texas, we see a lot of 90s on this map. And it's getting kind of late in the year for that. Well, not to be outdone, the desert Southwest has had a really hot year, and that will continue into the weekend, including Sunday, still above average for the desert Southwest, 11 degrees above average, according to this map, for Phoenix and for Tucson and Central California, even 15 degrees above average. It cools off in the upper Midwest. Temperatures not quite back down to normal, but closer to normal. And then the pocket of heat moves into the southern plains and also into the Midwest. And those temperatures for Sunday look like this. Those 90s suppressed down into Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and into Texas. The triple digits still in the desert Southwest. And now 70s return for the upper Midwest. And even 60s up into the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, even some 50s. But 83 for Columbus, Ohio, still on the warm side. So that's how the weekend is looking. Still warm and still dry. And really, through almost into mid-October, this is the 7th through the 11th. And the western 2/3 of the country with a very good chance of above average temperatures, and that includes the southeast. The coolest, the best chance for some cool weather or below average weather would be mid-Atlantic into parts of the northeast, and it's going to stay dry, looks like. The exceptions would be the extreme Pacific Northwest down in the southeast, tropical moisture. We're not talking hurricane, but tropical moisture. And then up into the northeast as well. Everyone else dry. So there you go. The weather's kind of boring. So you must really love weather to still be here. And I do appreciate that very much. So thanks for tuning in. We will do it again tomorrow, most likely in the morning, right here on the Weather Mic. Have a great Wednesday.